Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Black in the Saddle. On this episode, I am joined by Samir Geiger, founder of Be Worthy Horsemanship out of New Jersey. But before we get into his episode, I want to tell you a little bit about how Samir even got here because it's a really good story. Now, Samir grew up in Harlem and the Boogie Down Bronx. Okay. He was raised in his great grandparents' house, and the TV was always on Gunsmoke or Bonanza. If you know, you know. In that area, there were not a lot of opportunities to connect with horses, but every year there was a parade that goes through Harlem. And at the tail end of that parade were black cowboys and cowgirls on horseback. That was the first time he realized, wait a minute, we can do that too. That was none other than the Federation of Black Cowboys and Cowgirls in New York. Now, years later, he was on a job site and had a conversation with a guy talking about cowboy things. And it turns out that that guy was a cowboy, and he introduced Samir to more people in this kind of world, right? From then on, Samir started spending a lot more time around horse folks. And after a long trail ride with Miss Consuelo out in Maryland, she put him on a horse, and they spent hours on that ride trying to figure each other out. Now, him, that horse, and that was a wrap. He had the bug. So he started going to different trail rides and events, and he realized that a lot of the kids that were there didn't really have much to do if they couldn't ride. And the only time that they got attention was when they were getting themselves in trouble. So he started asking around in his local area about how people were supporting kids, and he learned about the Jersey High School rodeo events, but nobody really knew about it. So he decided that he was going to step forward and do something about it. He created programs in New York and New Jersey school systems that would teach kids who had never been around a horse before, and it is still growing to this day. We also talked about many things in this episode, including an injury that changed the way that Samir thinks about safety around horses and horsemanship itself, how he builds relationships with riding academies and other academic institutions, oftentimes out of his own pocket. It's not free. These are not free connections, right? And we also talked a little bit about what he plans to bring to the Kinship Conference this November. I am so excited to get into this episode and share a little bit more about Samir Geiger with you. Let's get into it. Welcome to another episode of Black in the Saddle. I have with me Samir Geiger, and I am so excited to hear his stories today. Now, I told you a little bit about him, but Samir, for our guests who are not familiar with you, I'm just curious, what was the moment that you knew that working with horses was something that you really wanted to do?
Okay. Um, I think there was actually two moments. Let's start with the second,
Hmm.
and that was when I seen the impact that horses had on inner city youth.
Hmm.
Um, while me and my staff were there, trying to introduce the youth to horses, it had an overwhelming effect on the adults that were around.
Mm.
And I think that was the point. I think that really was the point when I was like, yeah, this is what it is. Like, this is what's happening,
Mm.
And I knew that, I wasn't gonna be able to. Well, when I come in a room, right? When I come in a room with youth or whoever it is I'm supposed to be sharing with, I make it my job to turn everybody out on horses. Like, I want everyone leaving there thinking about nothing for the next week except how they're going to get around or on a horse.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So, you know, I I knew then that, this is what I wanted to do. I knew that everybody that I came across, I wasn't going to be able to convince, you know, um,
Yeah.
but I do believe that those that stay long enough, oh yeah, they're going to get bit. They're going to get bit. And it wasn't, and it, yeah, yeah, and it wasn't so much about, um, them turning their life over to, no, but just experiencing how wonderful and majestic these animals are, especially with those that may be holding on to something that others may not be able, or other animals may not be able to help them release,
Right.
which ushered in, the need for equine therapy and psycho equine therapy. And yeah, it's been quite a ride. The ride isn't
So,
over yet.
no, no, it's not. So, but tell me, what was the first moment? You said you started with the second moment, and that was the impact
Right,
of the horses on the youth. What was the first moment?
right. The first moment was filling the void of there not being any other, you know, um, programs that were really catering to inner city youth.
Hmm.
They're just, filling that void. Like I said, like I would be on trail rides and stuff like that, and there would be youth there, you know, nothing for them. There wasn't horses for them to ride.
Right.
There wasn't, even games, for them to play. Let's play horseshoes or something. There was the
Right.
only time that I seen that they got attention was when they were getting in trouble.
Hmm.
And this really, I said to myself, like, this has to change. This has to change, because if the median age is, let's say, um 35, let's go 28 to 40, then this is going to be short lived, because we ain't turning it over to nobody. And
Right.
there was a core of individuals that I was trying to explain this to, and every time I turned around, like, yeah, you do it. Yeah,
Hmm.
you go do it. Yeah, you do it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Say less. Say
So,
less.
so before you had these two revelations, were you in the school system already?
No,
Okay.
not at all. Not at all. Um, yeah, I'm a tradesman. That's what I do. I was not in the school system.
Okay.
I was not in the school system.
This just
I
felt like a calling.
Yeah, well, I a day camp connected to a private school
Hmm.
asked if I would, be willing to do a presentation and bring a horse or two. So I said, yeah, sure. And that was the start of it.
Okay.
Shortly after that, I got a call. Hey, you know, what's your schedule like September through June?
That's
How
a
much
long
can you?
time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially for kids that it was a long time for me, so I know it was a long time for them. Especially for kids that had never ever been around a horse before,
Right.
ever.
Right.
And that was St. Joseph's. Shout out to St. Joseph's. You know, yeah, they made it happen, and we were there 2 days a week, um, 2.5 hours,
Wow.
as part of their after school program. And the kids was lining up one year after the next year after the next year, and then other schools, charter schools, and each school would do something a little different. Like on one of the charter schools, they wanted to do all of the fourth graders, right?
Okay.
So they would give me 15 kids. We would be in the classroom for 4 weeks, and we would be at a riding academy for 4 weeks. I mean, for 3 weeks. right? So we made it a
Okay.
7-week program. Um,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
we'll take a break, and then they'll give me another set of 15. And then all of a sudden I start seeing some of the other kids from the first class creep back into the fourth class.
That's too
And
funny.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
before we
and
get all into the breakdown of it, because I think that it is fascinating those relationships that you have uh formed with those schools. You were telling me that, when you started riding and you started going on trail rides, you were new, you were learning, and you learned quickly, right? You had, the guys around that were doing some cowboy stuff and you learned from them. And then you thought at some point in there, you know, there's a better way, or I think I want to approach this differently, or was there a single horse that would like showed you that you needed to approach horsemanship in a specific way?
I'm gonna say yes. There was a horse. There was a horse that sort of guided me into exactly what it is I needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a horse by the name of Mocha. That it was a reining horse, and I probably shouldn't have, but I bought this horse. And this horse had all kinds of bells and whistles, and I didn't. I did not. And I left it with the trainer at his place, and I would go up on the weekends and learn the different buttons on this horse and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I cranked up a kid's saddle. I wanted to see if the saddle fit. It was a small saddle, right? So as soon as I pulled that saddle out, Earl said, "Man, you gonna ride that horse in that last saddle, boy?" And I was like, "Nah, I just want to see if it fit."
Uh-huh.
But I got on the horse with the saddle, and I wound up getting hurt.
Mm.
And it was quick, and it was fast, and I had a 2-hour ride home, and I didn't know that how hurt I was. I didn't know. There was some pain, it was some soreness, but after the salt bath, I'm gonna be good. And
Mm.
um, I had popped my pelvis open in the front and cracked it in the back. And I was saying to myself, it was my fault. It was my fault. I had a lot of red flags and I ignored them. You know, I didn't want to see that happen to anyone else early in their horsemanship or equestrian career. So, I started to really put safety first.
Mm.
I started to really put safety first and learning more about how something like that happens, like what causes that to happen. And that led me down a rabbit,
Mm.
in regards to horsemanship, in the different levels
Mm-hmm.
and the different takes that
Mm-hmm.
we have on it.
Right.
Just about anything I've ever done in my life, if I decided to do it, I become a student of it, and, this is what happened, and I don't know, I just started finding myself around some real pros,
Yeah.
you know. And they never asked me about what motivated me or anything. I knew what did, can it happen again? Can it happen tonight in this arena right here? Yeah, it can, but we want to try to decrease those odds as best as we
Right.
can,
Right.
and I think, I really believe this now. If we understand how a horse thinks, how a horse processes information and situations, it helps us to become better horsemen and horsewomen, right? Is it going to
Yeah.
prevent all accidents from happening? No, no. And no one in their right mind that's been around horses can think that it will. But, just, being aware, and approaching things differently, can help with that. So, I think that was like really, really a turning point for me. Really a
That
turn.
is
And I've and I had fallen off of a horse before. I mean, like really splat out. I mean, like, yeah, like I didn't really, I've been dumped before,
Hmm.
but nothing, none of that. We got right back up, back on the same horse, all right, let's go. Um, but I think that really let me allow me to think about some things differently,
Hmm.
and yeah, yeah.
I know that many of us have like that story that was like the turning point for us, right? Like sometimes it's I hit the ground and sometimes it's something else that happened. For me, it was falling in a hole full of water at a halfway point at a trail ride. But
Mm,
that's a
mm.
story for another day. I want to talk about you're doing these programs for the school, but had Be Worthy Horsemanship started yet, or did it come out after that, after the fact? Oh, you had done a few sessions and you were like, oh, okay, I should make this like an official thing.
I think Be Worthy had already been established,
Okay.
definitely in my head and in my heart. The
Mhm.
words weren't chosen lightly, right? Because I think in order to be a good cowhand, to order to be a good cowboy, in order to be a good equestrian, anything pertaining to what you have to be worthy of being on a horse's back,
Mhm.
right? Um, and me with limited knowledge, all I can offer, if that, was 101, was basics, which spawned Be Worthy 101.
Mhm.
I wasn't trying to profess to, possess anything that I didn't have, you
Right.
know. Um, so it started with that, but then I knew that, I needed to be official. I needed to have, paperwork. I needed to be insured. So out of it, I had to make it official as quickly as possible. Especially when you're going in and trying to explain what it is that you do and how this can help and stuff like that. So early on, I got all that off the ground very early.
Yeah. What year was that? Do you know?
That
Do you
was,
remember?
yes, that 2021.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think December of
Okay.
2021.
Awesome. Can you tell me a little bit about like the learning curve there? Because, you were doing something brand new and had to figure all of this out.
Okay. I tried to do my very best to consult with giants in the industry.
Mm.
You know, um, I did not make a move unless I had 3 or 4 checks, and there were a lot of people. Now, mind you, this is the New York, New Jersey area. This ain't horse country. We not known for cowboys and cowboying. However, this area does have a rich history, with horses and horsemen. So I immediately tapped into all of those resources. Um, I'm not afraid to travel, I would travel, I would go different places, I would pick people's brains, especially like, at black rodeos. It was an opportunity for me to talk to cowboys and cowgirls from around the country all in one spot. As
Hmm.
opposed to me going to Oklahoma, me going to Fort Worth, me going here, me going, I can meet them there, try to touch bases with them beforehand, try to get whatever information I needed. Um, yeah, and that worked, and it's still working. And connections, and stuff like that are still being made. You
Yeah.
know, um,
That's
yeah,
so dope.
I think it was a matter, the footwork, and I don't think anyone else really, before then, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I just don't know about it. Was really that interested in developing a program.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
So
uh,
can you tell me a little bit about some of the like what it looks like when you have these kids from New Jersey, New York that are coming to your programs, seeing horses for the first time. What do they look like when they first get there? And then what changes them or what do they look like at the end?
okay, let's back up. When I first get there, there are no horses.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. You said that.
There
Right.
are no courses.
Classroom.
It's usually at least 4 weeks before they actually see a horse,
Tell
right?
me about
But
that. Cause
okay,
that's so neat and important.
okay. First, I try to confuse them a little bit, so to speak. I may walk into class and I'll be like, "Hey guys, thanks for coming to my goldfish club. We're gonna learn all about goldfish," and to see the look on their face, you know, um goldfish, this is supposed to be, oh yeah, that's right, and that's sort of like an icebreaker, and that gets everyone thinking, horses, and we start with um Be Worthy 101, Introduction to Horses, which is just going over similitudes, right? That horses and humans share,
Mm,
community, comfort, we go over that, and, we establish two acronyms, PMA, Positive Mental Attitude, and CCC, calm, confident, and collected. And we'll spend some time on that, especially the PMA part, right, which is positive mental attitude. And I try to instill in them that, and some of these kids are young, and you'd be surprised how quick they get it, that we have to maintain a positive mental attitude in everything that we learn. And you all are just starting your educational process. So there's going to be things that you're not interested in, but give it a chance. You never know when you're going to need it. And at the very least, you'll know when you see that subject again, you're not interested because you've spent a little bit of time learning about it. We do that. And then being calm, all the kids know what it means to be calm, to be confident. Hey, I know that St. Joseph's turns out very confident students, and I could, see it in all of y'all, um, but collected,
mm,
being collected, is what most of them struggle with, if anything, and once we go over the definition, in its simplicity, of being focused,
right.
being laser focused, that sort of like sets the stage for that first day, and then we build, after that. They don't understand, they don't know this, but, one of the first things that they learn is, the language of equus, the way that horses communicate,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that this is a nonverbal way of communication. You'd be surprised how many kids struggle to verbalize what it is that's going on, and some of them can immediately identify it with this, and we do that, and, we go over colors, right? Which from the American Quarter Horse color chart,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's
Yeah.
what we use. So, we
Yeah.
have nice, nice pretty colors, and how every color isn't what you've learned it to be,
Right.
you know, and how some things can be named some things, but when we look at it, we can obviously see that it's something else. So it starts to move their thinking in different ways, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And depending on how long the course is, we'll get right to, what I like to call, and they do this in the industry as well, points of the horse.
Mm-hmm.
So if we got 4 weeks, we're gonna cover 20 different body parts, right? And we're not just going to cover the body parts. I need you to memorize those body parts in the order that you got them in. Now they're starting to compartmentalize, and see how one links to the other and exactly what it is that these different body parts do. So they're learning some soft skills and some hard skills, but they're learning them by way of horsemanship and horses. And
I love that.
yeah, it's been wow.
When I meet black horse folks, there is one of two stories that usually happens. Number one, they're the first or the only black person at their barn, and so they're trying to connect with other people who look like them and be in community. Or number two, they have devoted their time, energy, and resources to a career in this industry, and they're trying to figure out if other people are experiencing the same challenges or opportunities that they are experiencing. At the end of the day, everyone has a story. And that is exactly why we built this event, the Kinship Conference. Black in the Saddle is partnering with Urban Culture Association of Black Cowboys and Cowgirls to bring the Kinship Conference to Greensboro, North Carolina, November 6th and 7th, 2026. We're going to have over 20 speakers sharing their experience and their perspective. We're going to have sessions, workshops, industry roundtables, and panels and live entertainment both nights. Very excited for that. If you are someone who is looking to connect with other Black equestrians, or you just value hearing the stories and understanding and immersing yourself in the culture, you need to be in the room. Tickets are available now at blackinthesaddle.com/kinship. That's blkinthesaddle.com/kinship. Well, so I think that's so important. And, when you were recommended, when I started talking about the Kinship Conference and bringing speakers, I can't even remember for the life of me who recommended you. But when I had a phone call with you, because the speakers coming to the Kinship Conference, it was not like, hey, anybody want to speak? Like, who wants to speak? No, it was people that I had seen, and I see how they move and I see how they think in this industry, right? I didn't know that. I didn't know about you yet. And when we talked, that was something that was that stood out to me, how important it is to help kids have an understanding about the horse before they even get around the horse. That is not common, my friend. And so many parents and educators, like, they expect that horse right then. We've kind of created this expectation that there is no value until you are riding, and I do not believe that to be true at all.
I don't want to cut you off.
No, I see you smiling. Go ahead.
Yeah, because I actually, I believe that the riding part is the small takeaway. It's the small takeaway that lasts the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
But what they get before that is so instrumental on how they carry that riding part.
Mm-hmm.
Now I didn't got one kid in particular, man. This kid, excellent in the classroom. We get to the riding academy, and everybody, now this is the other thing about the program. I contract with a couple of riding schools, one in New York, one in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
The school in New Jersey, they bought all into the program, right? They got extra lesson horses for the program. I can put 15 kids on their own horse at one time.
Wow.
Right? So, but we try to break it down to like 7 and, 8, like that, right? But we have had all 15. Absolutely stunning, right? And everybody did well. At least 3 lessons. We call it the walk, the trot, and the lope. And you may not make it all the way to the lope or whatever, but, this is what I call the lessons, and this is what we're aiming for.
Mm-hmm.
One kid did great. We get to the riding academy. They give him his horse. You're going to be on Prince, right? So I'm up in the bleachers. I'm watching. I'm just there for moral support. I don't teach kids how to ride,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they call me. He's a no-go. So I said, all right, come over here. What's the matter? You don't want to ride? He don't want to talk. I take your helmet off. Come sit next to me. Okay. I said, listen, I just want to tell you this. Tonight, when you close your eyes and get ready to go to sleep, you're going to wish you gave that horse a chance. You're going to wish you gave yourself a chance. About 2 minutes later, Mr. Samir, I want to ride. Half an hour later, to see him ride and waving at me with one hand was absolutely heart-dropping.
Mm-hmm.
Heart-dropping. But I knew that there were some things that he had to overcome, and I wasn't going to be able to help him with that at that point.
Right.
Fear. He had to gain courage. He had to gain agency. These is things that he had worked on, didn't even realize it.
Right.
And when he reflected, he was able to go ahead and do that and get that done.
Mm-hmm.
And
incredible.
There's been I had a kid tell me when I did the goldfish joke.
Mm-hmm.
He said, listen, I'm going to tell you right now, 5th grader, I'm going to tell you right now, I hate horses. I'm going to tell you that right now. I said, all right, well, we're going to try to change your mind. He cried the first time he came with his parents. He
Mm-hmm.
cried. He didn't want to leave.
Oh,
That's the power, of this animal. And
yeah.
yeah, and I try not to expose them to anything that's going to prove to be detrimental for their advancement,
Mm-hmm.
in this industry.
Yeah.
Because the game plan is to get them riding and get them active, whether it be roping or racing, running barrels, whatever it is, to get them to that point.
Right.
And I think that is the next phase, of Be Worthy Horsemanship 101. That
Okay.
that is the next phase. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, talk to me a little bit about how important partnership and collaboration have been for you because like you just said, you don't necessarily teach the writing piece of it, but you are the catalyst to getting these students to this place.
okay. The collaboration with the riding school, with the riding schools, one call themselves the riding academy, um, is basically me paying the money for the kids to ride. There's no discount. There's no, hey, let's do this together. No, it's like me showing up with cash or card,
Okay.
and making it happen. And I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that. I like to keep things as small as possible, so we don't got a whole lot of a big fuzzy ball going on. That the path
Mm-hmm.
is clear. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have a problem with that. Um, I have tried to collaborate with other clubs, groups, and organizations in my area. You know,
Yeah.
and it hasn't worked out very well.
Yeah.
It hasn't worked out very well, and that's cool. Some come early, some come late. It's okay. I did a roping clinic in the heart of Newark. I've never been done before. They thought I was
Mm-hmm.
insane. It was a roping clinic in the hood in Newark in a beautiful park. Newark does have some beautiful parks. I flew in Maurice Wade. Shout out to Maurice Wade from Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
He's been roping for 50 years,
Mm-hmm.
and he understood the mission. It wasn't so that these kids could go out and win belts and buckles and checks next week. No,
Right.
it was about exposing them to something different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I had 30 kids and 30 adults.
Wow.
You know, um, that was another big opportunity for individual, but nobody's seen it, and I couldn't wait. So it happened. It happened.
Yeah.
Um, I think I would love to collaborate um in different areas on things, and I do have, some organizations and groups that are interested. They just trying to see, exactly where they can, fit in. But
Yeah.
this is the thing, we don't have many horsey organizations in the Northeast,
Mm-hmm.
especially once you get past Maryland. You know,
Right.
I
Right.
have done something with Fletcher Street Urban Riding Club. Shout out to Fletcher Street Urban Riding Club. And that was a little nervous for me because those kids ride already.
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, so I didn't want to be up there trying to make a point. They'd be like, no, sir. you know,
Because you know they will call you out.
yeah, yeah. But it
Just
was, it was 4 weeks. It was wonderful. A
mm-hmm.
nice relationship was fostered. Um, Hoping to be down there again, and
Yeah.
yeah. And then I had some people that wanted me to do some things that were just way out of my scope. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I'm saying? Like 14 days. Up in Boston, out of side of Boston somewhere, or something like that. Um, but yeah, it's been a blast. I've had some good people advising me and
Mm-hmm.
helping me along the way, and
I was
and
gonna ask you, do you have a team? You talked about having staff. Tell me about how
yeah,
you developed your team.
um, just people that were willing to help, that had the skills that were needed,
Mm-hmm.
and utilizing them, as I needed them, you know, um, and that has worked out fine, and that has rotated. everybody is not available. This ain't a priority for a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
So, and I understand that. But for those that, have, stepped up, to help, like I appreciate that. I have one family out of Newark. It don't matter what I'm doing, like they're there and they're ready to help, you know.
Don't you
Um,
love that?
yeah, 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 I do.
It
I
makes
do.
it easier to commit to it when you know you have someone who is going to be there to support. We commit to the things already, but you got one more person in your corner. That's just it changes the game.
And I gotta mention her, Keisha Morris, president of Federation of Black Cowboys.
Hmm.
She's always giving me good advice, checking me when I need to be checked. I have collabed with them
Hmm.
to do something in New York before, and that was great. And it was a lot of wet face. Well, it was a wet face. I know I had a wet face because remember I mentioned early on about that parade that used to come by when I was a kid. That was them. That
Mm,
was them. They're old enough to be my parents.
yeah,
That was them. And to be out there with them sharing, was like, wow.
yeah.
Like, yeah, that was,
Or
if
full
it ended
circle
right there, I
could
would have
be
been good.
enough. Yeah,
You know, you
yeah.
know.
That's awesome. What do you think goes through the minds of some of these kids when they see a black man bringing these horses to them? Because it oftentimes isn't that these kids never see horses, never have seen them ever. They see them on TV, they see them in random things, social media, in a children's book, something. They have seen a horse, they know what a horse is.
Right.
But seeing a black man on a horse or teaching them about this way to connect with a horse, what do you think that means to them, or have they told you what that means to them?
Um, I can't remember offhand if any of them have told me exactly what it means to them. And I'm sure that some of them have.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it shows them um possibility. I think it shows them empowerment. Um, I think it helps instill in them that they can,
Hmm.
I can. Um, yeah, just off the top of my head, I think that some of the things, that it shows that it instills in them. Um, yeah, I've had a kid tell me, I didn't know we did that.
Mm.
Like, what you mean? And I pretty much know what they mean. Like ride horses and stuff like that. I didn't know we did that. Like, yeah, we doing it.
Yeah.
We doing it. You
Yeah.
know. And once again in Jersey and New York, um, you don't see it much. I know adults that have kids that have raised kids here in Jersey and didn't know that there was a Jersey high school rodeo.
Oh, wow.
And Jersey high school rodeo is from kindergarten to 12th grade.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
Well, you are coming to share your wealth of experience at the Kinship Conference. I would love for you to share just a little bit about what you are wanting to share with people,
mm,
how you plan to tell your story, about how you have gotten this far into the BW horsemanship, Be Worthy Horsemanship game. What is it that you want the Kinship Conference attendees to know?
mm, that horses are not like us.
Mm-hmm.
That the way that horses process what it is that we're offering them, it's a different process, and it's for us to make the adjustment. You
Mm-hmm.
know, basically, that's in a nutshell. That's what I want to share. How do I plan on getting from A to B? By what we learned about ourselves early on, our senses. our senses and how they play, a role in our experience in the world. The same thing, the similarities and those things that are totally different, and how understanding, a way that a horse processes situations
Mm-hmm.
um, allows us or affords us a tremendous opportunity to get maximum benefit from them
Mm.
through comfort and trust, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to fear, pain, and intimidation. You know, and,
Mm.
and that's it in a nutshell. Will we take some mountains and some rocky roads and get in there? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because I know that a lot of people that I've been around, they see things differently.
Yeah.
They do things differently. You know, so we're gonna lay down some facts. We're gonna take some. But really, I'm coming there hoping to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And how I got there, yeah, I'm willing to share that. But this is my mantra. It's not about me. It's
Right.
not about me at all. It's about the horse.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the horse. And when I say the horse, I mean my horse, your neighbor's horse. That's what it's about. It's about the horse. It's not about us, you know? And, I run across that sometimes, with some cowboys of color. They, they just want to be known
Yeah.
as that black guy with a horse.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
that black guy.
Yeah.
And that's them and that's their thing, so be it, rock out, do you, but I know that these animals, can really benefit us,
Yeah.
can really benefit us. And, understanding them a little better helps,
Yeah.
you know.
I I completely agree with you on that. It isn't about us, but I really find value in the stories that we can tell about the things that we've learned from them, right? I mean, that's why we're here. Right?
Yes. And I agree. I
um
agree.
and so I'm curious to know, just within your story, what are some of the things that you felt like have changed inside of you along this journey?
Mm. The biggest um, is the acquisition of patience.
Mm.
Um, there is no successful horsemanship without patience. You know, um, not to tell a story, but I tell a story.
Please tell a
I'm with,
story.
I'm with a world-renowned trainer, and I'm on a horse. And he's like, do this, do that, do this, do that. All right, yeah, and then ride out the gate. Then do that. Then turn that. And the horse hadn't been ridden in a few months. You know, so I'm on the horse and I'm talking to him. I said, listen, let me tell you something, man. Out of all due respect, man, I understand you come from a very competitive discipline and you need that horse to do what you're asking right then and there. You're being judged by three individuals. That horse has to do it on the spot. I said, me and my horse got all week, bro. She don't get it today, she'll get it tomorrow. And he looked at me like, did you just say that to me? Yeah. And I meant it. And I meant it too. It's just been some. And then he said to me afterwards, like, now we untacked and, this and that. And we just, I was like, you know what, man? You're right. You're right about that. You're right
Mm-hmm.
about that. Would everyone say I'm right about that? No. Am I right about that? Well, I felt as though I was,
Mm-hmm.
at the time. But because he wants me to do one thing and I'm riding what's underneath me. He don't know what I'm feeling, underneath me to tell. I have to ride within my capability, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's just, being around people like that has really, really helped me,
Yeah.
has really helped me.
Yeah.
Um,
I completely agree with the need, or requirement for patience. Even in my own journey, I got my full size horse when he was 7 months old.
Mm,
And so there's this rearing of this young horse expectation, and you gotta put your hands on them early or they're gonna be crazy,
mm, mm,
that
mm,
kind of energy. And then fast forward to when I got my miniature horse, I was like, okay, everyone is talks junk about minis and how evil they are, so I want to make sure that I'm going to treat him like a full size horse. I'm not going to coddle him and baby him and things like that. But that little horse was like, ma'am, I don't have to move that fast.
mm,
Actually, what you want me to go right? Have you heard of left?
mm,
Okay,
mm,
we're going to go fast. Have you heard of slow? Why do you think you have the better idea? What about my ideas? And that was like, oh,
mm, mm.
this little baby has humbled me many times,
Yeah,
despite
yeah.
being such a great horse. And we, have this relationship if it's got to be his idea. And I had to step up to the plate instead of rushing him through my own objectives or agenda. I had to say, oh, okay, how can I create the conditions to where he believes this is the best choice? And patience was
Mm,
absolutely required for that.
mm,
So I
mm.
completely get it. Completely
Yeah,
for it.
and patience is one of those things that transcends, the equestrian world into real
Mhm.
life, and
Mhm.
and really, starting to build that and instill that and build that in young people is
Mhm.
extremely important. I don't believe that there's any success in anything in life without some patience,
Yeah.
and a lot of times it's not taught. It's something that people acquire through a whole lot of mistakes,
Yeah.
to a whole lot of mistakes where they just, are left with no choice but to have patience. But if we treat it as a building block, something that we can instill and build and add to, it goes a long, long way. A long way. So
So
I
true.
think that that's like, tantamount, along with like timing.
Mhm.
And this is one of the things that we talk about all the time, and you'll see it on Be Worthy Apparel: timing, feel, and balance. It's something that I learned from Tom Dorrance and his brother Bill Dorrance, who are some giants in the industry.
Mhm.
Um, and they've passed on,
Mhm.
but they've left disciples, like Ray Hunt and Buck Brenneman and these guys. There were words of wisdom, and I don't know if they knew at the time. Yeah, they're talking about horses. They're talking about horses, but it pertains to people too, you
You're
know.
exactly right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so thrilled to have you coming to the Kinship Conference. I know that people are just going to take away so much wisdom and insight and be able to apply all of what they learned from all the speakers, really,
Yeah.
to their journey. So I really thank you for being willing to take a chance on this because, not everyone thinks the same. And I'm not even saying that all the speakers at the Kinship Conference think the same, but I
I
do
hope not.
believe, right, right. No, we have a lot to learn from everyone.
That's right.
But I do think that we need the space to talk about it. Right. And to be able to say, without it being in the heat of competition or, um, in some sort of performance to say, like, wait a minute, this is the way I thought about this, but I've changed my mind.
Right.
Or I didn't know this and I needed a safe space to learn about it. So that's truly what I'm hoping that people get from this event. But I want to take you into a little bit of a lightning round. I have some questions. You answer them as quick as you can. Are you ready?
Okay. Okay.
All right. It's not too bad. It's not too bad.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Name of the first horse you ever rode?
Chip.
Chip. Okay. What
Nope. I
is
take that back.
oh
I'm sorry. Coop. Coop. Cooper.
Coop? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about Cooper. Who is what kind of horse is it?
It's a quarter horse, a dun,
Okay.
um, about 6 1 hands, um, gentle when you want to be. But that was the first horse.
Okay. All right. What is one word your students use to describe you?
Serious.
That is funny. That is funny. All right. What is the best horse related advice you've ever received?
Don't dress better than you can ride.
Okay. That's hilarious. I know there's a story behind that, but we're going to keep going for the lightning round. What is the worst horse related advice you've ever received?
Just get on them.
Felt. Felt. I know the answer to this, but do you prefer groundwork or riding?
Riding.
Yep. What is one thing that every new rider needs to learn?
There's a lot. I'm gonna say always wear a helmet.
Okay, okay. And if you were doing anything else in the world besides Be Worthy Horsemanship 101, what would that be?
Down in Texas, learning how to rope.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Samir, for coming on Black in the Saddle podcast. I know we had some technical difficulties, but you were so patient with me. And I'm so glad them horses taught you how to be patient, okay? Because technology was not our friend in the beginning, but I
It's all
am
right.
so thankful that we made it here. And I look forward to seeing you in November.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Black in the Saddle. Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcasting player and over on YouTube. You can also join us on Patreon. We started that new this year, and that is where the behind the scenes lives, okay? Behind the scenes of episodes, of events that we're planning this year, and much, much more. So I cannot wait to see you over there.